in my journey of 11 years of, speaking to a lot of law students, established lawyers, the kind of uh, information I'm going to be sharing with all of you today is not something that only law students do. Even people who've been practicing law, and when they switch jobs and when they make their series, those are mistakes that even those people do. So nothing is supposed to be taken to heart. What I'm trying to share with you guys here is very general experience that I've kind of gathered by looking at several CVs. And, I go through this every week, and I kind of find out ways to reach out to a lot of law students to help them understand how and what can we do better so that their candidature doesn't get affected. Because when you prepare a CV that doesn't leave an impression, guys, trust me, the only person who suffers is perhaps you guys yourselves, because the organization still gets a lot of CVs to choose from. So try and help yourself. I'm going to give certain pointers, which I hope are useful for everyone. So first and foremost, what do we understand from CV? And what is there? Why is there a need for us to have a fantastic CV or a CV that leaves an impression? So guys, the CV is your window to showcase the personality behind what we see as the person. So when you send in your applications, you're just a name. Through the CV, when we open the CV, we want to know the person behind that name. We want to see what is that person's journey looks like. What does that person's accomplishments looks like? So somewhere, I think when you sit to prepare CV, your intention of why you're creating it and your interest in your own self or furthering your candidature is something that reflects in the aesthetics of how you choose the CV or the model or the layout or the colors. So first things first, try and do not dump a lot of information on your CV, because that's not going to help anybody's purpose. I've been taking interviews the entire of last 2 weeks, and trust me, guys, when you get CVs which mention about internships, and you've actually written down sections. I've done section 9 of so and so act. I've done section 12 and so act. It doesn't really solve anybody's purpose, because we don't want to see what your exact legal knowledge in terms of sections and bare acts is. That's something an interviewer will speak to you when they are taking the personal interview. What I want to see from your CV, and when I say I'm speaking from the recruiters or the employer's perspective. What we'd like to see in the CV is your accomplishments in terms of the journey, right from your education, the early years of education. I've been asked this question several times, whether we should mention the schooling part or not. And I feel that one should mention, because that shows the kind of streams you chose, the kind of background that you are from, and it makes a difference whether you've chosen a commerce field or a science field, how your earlier education prior from taking up the law courses, how does that shape up is an extremely important part of your education journey. So mention that very clearly. I usually put things in reverse chronological order, and I prefer it that way. So when I say reverse chronological order, that means the latest information comes first. So any of your accomplishments, any of your educational qualifications which you've done, the most recent should come up first and then go in the reverse order. Same applies for your experiences, of whether it's of a job experience or whether it's of an internship experience. It has to go in the reverse chronological order. But what's more important is how you summarize your experience. So again, as I mentioned, there is no need for you guys to put sections or the bare acts that you did. I think what is important is the takeaway from every internship that you do, or takeaway from every position of responsibility you've held. So instead of just mentioning that this is what my role was, or this is what I learned, I would somewhere say that go slightly extra mile and say, what matters to a recruiter is the kind of practical exposure you have gained through your internship. It doesn't come only from sections of barracks. If you've visited court, mention that you've been a part of, someone who's actually hands-on been a part of a team that's going to be visiting the court, that has visited the court, or if you've been involved in some sort of a research, which is very important and actually became the base of something bigger. So mention the achievements which catches the eye of a recruiter, which catch the eye of an employer. I think that part is extremely, extremely important. And play on your strengths. If you've done very well academically, I think that information should be displayed prominently. And if you're, if according to you, you've not done that great in internships, ensure that the information of your academic excellence, if you're a rank holder, if you've done some some brilliant scores in your educational career, mention those highlights first and more prominent, because that's important for you to highlight and play on your strengths. But at the same time, don't think that anything is going to be hidden from the interviewer or the employer, because they, of course, go through even the minutest of details. And this also brings me to the point that a lot of us write things in CV which we do not really mean, or which we do not really, sometimes it's just cool to put it. Sometimes we see a lot of other people doing it. So we thought, okay, you know what, we are also going to be putting. So, for example, I see a lot of people being inclined towards arbitration and ADR without having much work done in that. So if you're mentioning arbitration, if you're mentioning anything with respect to ADR, be prepared, because then the interviewer is going to ask you about the conventions. They are going to ask you about international arbitration, domestic arbitration, the applicability of awards, and details like that. What it, I would say, a CV is also a bait to the interviewer. You can actually run your interview experience through your own hands if you choose to put the information in your CV very strategically. If you want your employer to talk to you about, let's say, IPR or technology related laws, or anything that you've done more on the constitutional law side, mention those experiences, because the moment an interview sees them, they are kind of tempted to ask you, oh, this is what you've done, this article you've written, and then they're going to ask you questions with that. So if you want your interview to be kind of molded in a certain flow or pattern, it's quite quite a large percentage of it, it's in your hands. That's something sadly a lot of students do not realize. If you've written an article, if you've done your publications, but it was just a mere academic piece without you having put your heart and soul into it, the interviewer might catch it, because they are going to ask you if you've spoken about sexual harassment, if you've spoken about child abuse, if you have mentioned any NGO experience. Be prepared that the interviewer is going to ask you questions with respect to that. So when you're building the CV and you want your interview to go in a certain direction, ensure that whatever you want them to prod you on, make sure all of those points are mentioned in the CV, so that a large part of your interview process is driven through the CV. I think another caution, a piece of caution would be, guys, to not dump anything that you cannot substantiate in an interview process. And I've seen this, people writing publications or article done or research done, or I'm the editor at this particular place. But when it comes to the interview portion, and when it comes to the physical or the virtual interview, and the interviewer asks you, please elaborate. I find a lot of students falling short of the kind of explanation that they should be carrying for what they mentioned on their CV. So one important point is, anything that you cannot substantiate, I would request not to put that, for sure. Another important do, or I should say another important don't, is leaving any margin of factual errors, gaps, or mistakes. Spell check twice, spell check thrice if the need be. Because please understand that if anyone notices an error in your CV, or any grammatical error, or something that you have misspelled, which should have which could have been taken care of, what needs to be done at that particular point in time is that it leaves a very bad taste in the with the interviewer, because this is something that has actually happened a lot of times, that people are using abbreviations that are generally not known. So if you're using abbreviations, if you're doing any shortcuts, I would say don't opt for it until you are completely sure of